I wanted to make sure that the Obamas were not the only ones living in public housing who were going to be able to make a choice. Like, nobody should be out here talking about how wonderful virtual learning is, because it's not wonderful. And I believe that the United States is going to pay a price.
Freedom issues my entire life. Some of them, just people around the world.
People forget that there are lots of people being tortured, executed. I don't even think like I'm thankful. I'm saying like, well, damn, finally.
Greetings and welcome to Workable Words, hosted by me, Lartigue Jr. I'm an American living and working in Seoul, South Korea, and this is a podcast where we talk with people who are doers as well as people who have something interesting to say. There's an old saying that there are three kinds of people in the world. There are the people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and then the people who ask, hey, what happened? Okay, so we want to talk to those first two groups of people, the ones who are the doers who make things happen, as well as people who have some things to say, and we can learn some things from them and hopefully apply it to our lives. Today, we're talking to a real doer. His name is Howard Fuller. So many things. Let's see, he's an author. He's a longtime activist, educator, been involved in many things over the years. And I can say with pride that he's been a mentor of mine for 2 decades now, which means that neither one of us is very young. So first of all, Dr. Fuller, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Casey. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to, first of all, answer the question, what have you done? I mean, because you've been around since like the mid 1960s. So for people who don't know you, what is it that you've done?
Well, I don't know. Nobody likes to really talk about themselves in that way, but for purposes of your show, I've been very fortunate in my life to have done a variety of different things that I think all had to do with the same thing. But I've been a dean of general education at Milwaukee Area Technical College. I've been a secretary in the Department of Employment Relations for the state of Wisconsin, which meant that I was in Governor Tony Earl's cabinet. And I essentially ran the personnel management agency for state government. I also was the overseer of the civil service system. I've been the head of the Department of Health and Human Services for Milwaukee County. I've been the superintendent of the Milwaukee Public Schools. When I resigned from that position in 1995, I set up the Institute for the Transformation of Learning at Marquette University, which is where I was until June 30th of this year when I retired. Then 2 years ago, the board honored me by naming the school after me. So now there exists in the city of Milwaukee the Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy, serving over 300 mostly low-income children in the city of Milwaukee.
I mean, first of all, I just have to say it is incredible to have a school named after you while you are still alive.
Yeah, that's all. I told him not to do that. I told him you should never name a school after, especially somebody who's crazy, because I get this vision of having to call a meeting. Oh, we got to take his name off the building. So hopefully
yeah, but that's quite an achievement and honor. So, and I got to visit the school last year, and it was really nice to meet some of the students who were there and see how they are so determined to make something special out of their lives. So what's the thing that you really like to be known for? So you've had this long career and you've had some good and bad names called about you, including, I remember 1969, you're called the most dangerous black man in North Carolina.
Press on. We are here to say to the white ruling class of this country and to the world that the niggas ain't niggas anymore. Fight on, because we are an African people. Because we are going to struggle. And remember, brothers and sisters, that if there is no struggle, there is no progress.
As far as I know, you've never committed a murder, but you're called the most dangerous.
Yeah, I've been called a militant. I've been called Uncle Tom. I've been called a revolutionary. I've been called a counter-revolutionary. I've been called a fighter for poor people. I've been called a person who was duped by billionaires. So I find it always interesting that one lone black man could be all of those different things. And I think it's because I have a very clear understanding about the difference between principle and strategy and tactics. And so over all these different changes that I've gone through in my life, I've always felt that I was functioning from the principle standpoint, but I pursue different strategies and tactics given the moment in time in which I lived, given what was available to me, and given just how I saw I could make a contribution at a particular moment in time. So if I was going to be known for anything, I mean, I would want it to be, a black man who cared deeply for black people, was always committed to the notion of how do you improve the lives of the poorest of our community? How do you give them more control over their own life? So if I would be remembered for anything, it would be that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you know, but a lot of your work and ideas have inspired my work over here in South Korea, working with North Korean refugees. But I have to say that I've gotten a lot of those labels also. I mean, it's kind of strange. When I first started working with North Korean refugees, I found out later that some people were accusing me of being a CIA agent. And then later on, I heard that I was like an agent for the State Department. And then later on, I heard that I was part of some big conspiracy against the State Department. And then I heard that I was involved with trying to undermine or destroy North Korea, which is not a bad thing. By the way, I'd be fine if someone could come up with a strategy for that. But I just have an education organization. And I wonder, because in your case, seems like you've mainly been a leader, not a follower. And I think in many cases that I'm a leader, not so much a follower. And when you're also out there in public, you just disgruntled people, angry people, whatever problems they've got on in their own lives, they project it onto you and start to attack you. So I don't know what kind of, my mentor, what advice do you have for me, as far as dealing with, because I usually ignore them and just move on.
Yeah, I think the reality of it is that you have to know who you are, and you have to know why you are doing the work that you do. And if you can be at that point, then you just have to be willing to take the weight for what comes from doing that. And the only way not to be criticized is to not do anything. And then, of course, you're criticized for not doing anything. So at a certain point in time, you have to pursue the direction that you believe in. You have to pursue the things that you think are important, the things that represent what you're about. Like I always tell people, there's a real difference between a job and work. Your work is what you're about in this world. Your job is what you do so that you can pay your bills. Because it's very hard for you to help other people when you need help, when you can't take care of your own individual responsibilities. And therein comes the contradictions, right? Because in order to do work, you need money, and you got to get money from somewhere. And usually you have to get money from people who have money. It's hard to get money from people who don't got no money. So then you get into the contradiction of whose money is okay, whose money is not okay, what does taking money mean, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to always, I think, be dealing with those types of contradictions. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, was to try to get people to understand, if you fight for social justice for 5 minutes, you're going to be involved in a lot of different contradictions. And the question is, are you willing to take the weight for living through those contradictions? And so that's, kind of how I approach it. When I was younger, I actually used to let stuff get to me, what people had to say about me. And so I had to get to the point where you just develop a really hard shell that says, I'm not going to let you all get to my soul, no matter what you say. And I'm going to understand how to deal with criticism, because if you're going to be a leader, you have to be able to deal with criticism, and you also have to be self-critical. And you have to also be willing to learn from others, because even though I've been in leadership roles, I also think I've been in follower roles, because I don't think you can be a, quote, good leader if you also can't be a good follower. Because at different points in time, even in a leadership capacity, you may be following someone who's under your leadership, but they may have a better idea or a better approach to something that you're trying to get done. And you need to give them that leadership capacity, and then you follow them. So, I think it's all about, why are you doing what you're doing? And if you're doing what you're doing because you are really trying to advance the interests, say, of an oppressed people, then you're going to function in a certain way. If you're doing what you're doing because you're trying to promote yourself as an individual, then you're going to function in another way.
Yeah. Well, when I get the criticism, and I think almost every month I've got somebody running a campaign against me, trying to destroy me. And I mean, one guy, he just was like, he's going to report me to the city government. And I'm like, you know what? Can I get you a phone number so we can have this call right now? Because I prefer to work this out right now instead of 5 years from now. And most of the time, I'm just like, really? You think I'm doing all this and all that? But I usually have two things. One, I go with the H.L. Minkin approach, the writer from the Baltimore Sun, where he would just reply with a nice letter, just, dear sir or madam, you may be right. Sincerely, H.L. Minkin. And then he would get back to his own work. Yeah. And I think that is important. But what I would do is I will read what they have to say. Every once in a while, they'll say something that makes sense, but I'm not going to dig in too deep. It's like if you got a $20 bill in a pile of, manure, it's not worth it. So now, if there's a $20 bill on top, okay, I'll just look and what is it that they have to say? And and actually, the first real job that I got in the USA was with the Cato Institute. And it was after one of these people just going after me and attacking me and saying, well, you're just trying to get a job at the Cato Institute. And I said, I never thought I could get a job at the Cato Institute. Why don't I send a letter to the Cato Institute and see what this is about? And then it turned out that they wanted to hire me. So I will listen to criticism. I'll read it, but I don't engage the people, right? Because I've learned that you're just feeding the beast then.
Yeah, sometimes I will engage. It depends. It depends, right? I mean, as you all know, there's certain things that I've done, like where I've done point by point refuting an individual or an organization or whatever. Other times I've done what you said Minkin does. I particularly did that a lot when I was superintendent, but in other positions I've had where I get these fiery letters and people going after me, and I just send them a letter and say, thank you very much for, expressing your opinion. I just want you to know that I read it, and I appreciate you, letting me know what you think. And then you keep moving,
Yeah. I've actually got some letters of apology from people after I just responded nicely to them. But I mean, pretty much that's a bad way to start any kind of relationship, with a punch to the face. So obviously they're not really trying to get stuff done. Now, you mentioned about strategy and tactics, and of course, I've heard you give many speeches over the years and talk with you many times, but the one speech that I'll never forget is storming the Bastille.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
could you?
Yeah, I just, because I have this idea that, when you're an organizer, one of the things you got to be clear about, and you and I have talked about this many times, if you set up a meeting for a whole bunch of people and 5 people come, the last thing you should do is berate the people who are not there with the 5 people who are there, right? Instead of embracing those 5 people who are there, making them feel like they're the 90 people who came, because they're there, and so they don't want to hear about all the people who are not there. They want to hear, okay, I'm here, what are we going to do, right? So I have this notion of when organized, it's kind of a takeoff on what Marvin Mead said about no significant social movement has ever taken place without a small group of committed people being at the core of making it happen, right? So I have this idea that if you're going to storm the Bastille, there's a small circle of people who are going to storm the Bastille. There's another circle of people who will hold the coats of the people who are storming the Bastille. There's another circle of people around the coat holders who will cheer for the coat holders. They're not going to hold the coats, and they sure as hell are not going to storm the Bastille, right? So as an organizer, you got to understand who's going to storm the Bastille, who's going to hold the coats, who's going to cheer for the coat holders. And sometimes you can get some of the people to move from one circle to another, but you shouldn't focus on that, right? The question is trying to make sure that everybody understands that the role that they're willing to play is important. And it's not belittling any role that is being played, right? It's amplifying whatever role people are willing to play to try to get something done, because you need people who would do different things. So for example, if you have a strategy, as I've had, where people end up going to jail, as I've gone to jail, you do want somebody who's outside who can get you out of jail, right? You don't want everybody be in jail. There's nobody outside who can get you out of jail. So again, you got to understand the different roles that people play, and you got to respect that. And you got to make sure that people understand how much you respect what they are contributing.
Yeah, well, that particular piece of wisdom, I remember we had a board meeting, or it might have been more of a general meeting, and we had one young man who was upset because not enough people had shown up, I think for like a chapter meeting. And you said then, look, if you plan for 100 people and 3 people show up, you've got 3 people to work with. Exactly. And now I've embraced that, and I've actually spread this out to many people over the years, including over here in Korea. And the thing I'll say to them is, look, if you can't do something with 3 people, you got 3 people. Okay. I mean, it's like Public Enemy said, if there are 3 of me, I could run a country. I mean, so if you got 3 people to work with, you can get something started. And then those 3 people can bring 3 people with them next time. And now you can start to build something instead of, as you said, I can't believe nobody showed up and what's wrong with them? And they promised this and they promised that. So your meeting has lost its point. And instead, just go ahead and get started.
Because as an organizer, you know that people lie. And some people, but some people also have good intentions when they tell you come in, but stuff happens. Other people just lie. They never intended to come, blah, blah, blah. But I'm coming. But one of the things I used to, when I was training organizers, I used to say, look, always get a room that's smaller than what you need. And don't ever put too many chairs up. You always want to have this view of you have to drag in chairs, right? Because there's more people than you thought was coming. And it's better to rent a small room. And people are like all crowded up in there, So when people panic, they're like, oh, standing room only. People can never get in there. Gonna get a great big hall, right? With all of these empty chairs. And people will stand the empty chairs, right? So, there's some things that you do like that to get people to understand the psychology of organizing as well as the actual practice of organizing.
Right. But I remember one thing we talked about before is the difference between organizing and mobilizing.
Yeah, so if you're mobilizing, it's a short-term thing, right? You mobilize people to show up at a rally. You organize people, it's like Ella Baker said, organizing is a more purposeful, deeper relationship work, right? Now, obviously, you mobilize as a part of organizing, but organizing is a deeper working relationship with people. And so how you go about organizing, if you're trying to actually give people power or allow people to express their power, that's different than all you're trying to do is to get people to show up at a demonstration. You're just trying to mobilize them. But as I said, in your effort to organize people, at a certain point, you may also have to mobilize people in order to have an action. But there is a difference between mobilizing and organizing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing that I heard from somebody else is Marion Barry. And I think I told you before that, back in 1981, he led the effort against the DC tuition tax credit. Yeah. And then when you and others and I, all joined together for the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program 2003, 2004, that I was talking with him, that former mayor of DC for like 16 years on the city council. And I asked him one day, Mayor Barry, why did you change your position? And and you knew him. He's like, I didn't change. And I'm like, okay, 81, you were there, 2004. Okay, all right, you didn't change. So then what happened? He says, okay, I didn't change, but in 1981, the people who came in just came in and tried to make an argument and run over people. You guys, when you came in this time, you came in and you said that, okay, look, there'll be some money for public schools, money for charter schools, which are also public, and money for creating a school voucher program, and that city leaders could get behind that. And that one important thing is that when you're involved in this kind of work, you do have to listen to the people, not just think you're going to make an argument and they're just going to switch overnight. But he said that, okay, look, well, actually, what he said is, look, in 1981, didn't nobody give us no money? I'm like, is that a triple negative? Didn't nobody give us no money? Okay, yeah, okay, all right. So he said, didn't nobody give us no money? That they just wanted to make an argument and just wanted us to obey them. And he says, look, I'm a situationist. I look at the situation and determine what's the thing that makes the most sense. And maybe in 1981, maybe it didn't make as much sense. And of course, depending on what the situation was and what could be done. But 2004, I don't know if he was that active with it, but at least he wasn't out there in front opposing the bill. So I think an important thing is that, at least in my case, I kind of have now adopted this idea of being a situationist. So I tell my staff over here in Korea, what's the situation? Let's analyze the pros and the cons, and then let's figure out what's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think, again, that's another way of also, though, looking at the issue of principle versus strategy and tactics. Right? Because the issue is, what is the principle that you stand on? What is your foundation? What is your core? And as you pursue actions, the question is, am I getting ready to make a decision here that is a violation of my principle? Or is it a part of changing my tactics based on what it is that I'm trying to get done? And I think that if you're intellectually honest, and if you're committed to purpose, which is another thing that I try to argue, is that you have to be committed to purpose, not to the method to get to purpose. Because when you get committed to a particular method or a particular institutional arrangement, that's when you're on the road to become a protector of the status quo. So the question is, what is the purpose that I get up every day? And while I'm committed to purpose, it may take me down different roads. But you have to be clear that whichever road you go on, at least from your perspective, it's still trying to remain committed to your purpose.
Well, that's like with education. So, obviously, when we worked on school choice in the past, that it wasn't a particular arrangement. It's like, okay, we got the public schools, they're there, there's an option. But this whole online learning might be coming on board. And of course, charter schools was kind of a new development at that time, private schools. So it wasn't so much about a particular public schools, but it's that we need to focus on education. So even some people will say that they're for school choice, but I start to say, look, I'm for education choice. It's not just like a particular school, but there might be some other arrangements that we haven't even thought of yet, or haven't found a way to make them work yet.
Yeah, that's interesting, Case, because the way I've always approached this is that I'm a supporter of public education, right? But public education is an idea. The Milwaukee Public Schools is a delivery system. And so what public education means is I'm committed to educating the public. We're going to create a number of different delivery systems to make good on that promise. And since these delivery systems that we created were not created by God, we could change them. And so to me, whether it's vouchers or charter schools or homeschool or online learning, it's all about the delivery system. And it's also about how do you finance that? Because those of us who have money got choice. Because if you have money and you don't like the way schools are operated, you can move to a community where they are working. You can put your kids in private schools, or you can get the most expensive tutoring on the planet. The people who can't do that are low-income and working class people. They're forced to stay wherever we send them. So for me, I always supported parent choice as opposed to school choice, because my goal was to make sure that low-income and working class parents were empowered to be able to make some of the choices that those of us with money could make. And what's really interesting, as you know, is the hypocrisy around this issue. Because you have people like when Obama was president. I think I got this from Bernice King, but it's an interesting idea that I wanted to make sure that the Obamas were not the only ones living in public housing who were going to be able to make a choice, for right. and so the fact that they could send their girls to Sidwell Friends, which I was fine with. I just wanted those same options to exist for low-income parents in DC, right? Because people used to say, well, if people have choice, the best parents, whoever they are, would leave. If you look at it, what better parents would there have been to have in the DC public school system other than Obama's children? but the Obamas were like, hey, man, we all this and that, but we got to make sure that our daughters get the best education possible, which is what I want for all people, to be able to do that with their children.
Yeah, the Obamas. Okay, two things about them. I mean, so first of all, I do remember 2009, one of the first things Obama wanted to do was to strip the money out of the Opportunity Scholarship Program. And I believe you went up to DC at that time, one of the speakers at the, you were at the rallies that we had then, because I joined also. But the other thing is that you had a debate with Obama.
Yeah, I did.
Well before he was president.
I think it was 1997 or 98. They told me to come over to Milwaukee and over to Chicago and debate this up and coming state senator named Barack Obama, who I've never heard of. And so, we had this debate. It was a panel. It was three of us, him, a guy named Cy Flegel, and myself. And as you know, because I think I may have sent it to you, they actually turned that discussion or debate into a pamphlet. And so there's no recording that I know of it, or no visual that I know, but there is a write-up because they translated it word by word. And so there's an interchange between me and Obama that was interesting, because when Obama became president, he essentially said the same thing when he was president that he said then about vouchers and choice and so forth. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, if you had known he would have become president, I'm sure he would say, "Let's take some photos tonight, everybody." And I think exactly. But is it in your book also? I thought I recall reading at least an excerpt.
There may be. Yeah, I think there was.
Yeah.
I think there was. Yeah, I think I forgot what chapter it's in, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So, So the title of this podcast is Workable Words, and is actually inspired by James McCune Smith, who talked about Frederick Douglass. And he said that, he didn't just use words just for the way they would sound, but he wanted to make something happen. So workable words, doable words. Now, there's another person who also could have inspired it. What's his name? Junebug?
Oh, Junebug Jabbo Jones.
Okay, all right. What is it that he said?
Yeah, he was a great African-American philosopher named Junebug Jabbo Jones. And what he said was that Mr. Say ain't nothing, Mr. Do is the man. And so the reality is you could say anything. The question is, what are you going to do? What, saying, Casey, you got people who, they are the sayingest people in the world. But they ain't gonna do nothing. You know what I'm saying? So I always, people say, well, who is Junebug Jabbo Jones? Well, it's the dude who lived on the street.
Oh, look, if I could take trips based on all the people who invited me saying they wanted to hear me give a speech somewhere, or all the donations I could have received from my organization from people saying they love the work we do, they want to help support it. Yeah, I wouldn't have to ever ask for any money from anybody ever again. And my freaking flyer miles, I could fly to the moon. So from all the stuff that people have been saying. So, all right, now I'm going to ask you something. Years ago, I heard a rumor that you're shy.
I am actually. I mean, I'm kind of antisocial, actually, and so people, it's hard to believe, right? But like, when I have to give a speech or when I have to interact with people and everything, I'm good with it. I actually like people. I also don't like to be with people a lot. I mean, I'm kind of a loner in that sense, and but I'm very respectful of people. I enjoy being with people, but like one of the things I would do, for example, whenever people would ask me to give a speech and they would have like the cocktail before the speech, right? I'd always get down there about 15 minutes before the speech because all of that smoozing and stuff, I hate that stuff. I can do it, and I have done it to raise money, but it's not something that I'm, comfortable with, right? So there is, I guess, it's kind of a contradiction in a sense, right? You would do some things I've done in my life and how I've gone about doing it, and sort of be shy or antisocial at the same time. But I am actually that way.
Well, I think a lot of people be saying, wait a second, we got this 6'4" black man who dominates the stage. And I've actually shown your speeches to some of my students. I teach public speaking here in South Korea. And I've shown it to some of my students. And I say, you know what? He says he's shy. And no one would believe it. So I tell them, look, you don't have to worry. Because most people are not trying to say, are you shy? Most people want to hear what you have to say. What is it that you're trying to do? So don't get stuck on, I can't go to the stage because somebody might sense that I'm shy. No, just do what you need to do.
I mean, I feel like I'm really blessed. I mean, to be able to move people with words. And one of the things that I believe deeply, and I learned this from my own experience, is that one speech can change a person's life in an audience, and you don't know that. And the reason why I know that is because in April of 1964, it was either April 3rd or 5th, I never could remember, at Corey Methodist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, Malcolm X gave the ballot or the bullet speech, and I was there. And I went into that church as one kind of black man, and I came out as another. Like, literally, that speech changed my whole life trajectory, man. And I've had people come up to me and tell me that, you gave a speech and such, and that speech, forced or, caused me to do this or that. And so I never take any speech, any interview, I never take those things lightly because you don't know who's listening. You don't know what impact it's going to have on their life. And so when you agree to do these things, what you owe people is really a commitment to be serious about what you're saying. And I understand that, there's no way you give a speech, everybody's going to agree with everything you just said. But many people will, depending upon how you deliver it and how they perceive it, they will take your words and it could actually make a difference in their lives. And because I know that happened to me, as I said, and I know that I've done that to other people because they've told me. And so I just think it's a blessing, and it's not something to take lightly.
Yeah. Well, so we got a production team around me. Dahe, what's your last name? Kang. Okay, yes. So Kang, Dahe, and Bo Kim are helping me out with doing this podcast. I'm going to ask them to put a small little clip of you doing one of your fire and brimstone speeches and say, this man says he's shy. All right. Okay. So then last thing, I want to just go ahead and talk about your school. So, where is it, and what's like the focus of it? Yeah. And how can people support it? Of course.
It's a charter school, and you can actually see it online. Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy. It's a high school. We serve 9th through 12th graders. Most of our students come to us 2 and 3 grade levels behind. This COVID reality has been devastating because even though we have an online curriculum, And so when COVID hit and they closed schools, we were able to pivot fairly quickly because we already had an online curriculum. The decision we had to make was to allow kids to take their Chromebooks home. But nobody should be out here talking about how wonderful virtual learning is, because it's not wonderful for a whole lot of kids. I mean, I'm not saying that there are not some kids who thrive in it, but one of the things that has happened with us is that for our seniors, for example, a lot of our seniors have been declared essential workers. It's interesting how the United States can change terminology. So at one point, people were low-wage workers. Now they're essential workers, right? And what we want them to do is go out there and risk their lives so that we can do Zoom. You know, so a lot of our seniors are working, 40, 43 hours a week, like I believe being exploited. And for a lot of these kids, they may be now the breadwinners in their families because, of the loss of jobs and so forth. So, it's really hard to tell some of these kids, look, you got to get in front of a computer for whatever number of hours a week or a day. And so, we've had to obviously adjust. They've had to adjust. I've been proud of the adjustments that they've made, but it's a difficult situation, Casey. And I believe that the United States is going to pay a price for these 2 years, that a lot of children have lost learning and they may not be able to make it up. And the impact of that down the road, a few years from now, we're going to see the results of what is happening or is not happening in this country right now as it pertains to education.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've had our own struggle. I mean, we have North Korean refugees studying in our program, and there's some who now they live on Zoom, but we've got some who, they're more basic level English language learners, and for them it's a struggle. And people, hey, just come on Zoom, let's just try. But actually, it's a struggle for them. But but what could be done differently? Because I don't know what's.
You could. I'm not saying anything could be done differently.
Okay.
What I am saying is, I'm trying to say two things. Number one, the move over to virtual learning for some people, like for example, in the Milwaukee public school system, the union and the administration signed an agreement early on that they would all get paid full time, but nobody would do any work. Literally, just on paper. So there was an outrage and blah, blah, and so people changed. But a lot of children never really got any kind of education. And I'm saying even a school like ours, where we were on it, a significant number of our kids struggled and are still struggling. The second thing that I'm saying is that we're going to pay a price for that. But the third thing that I didn't say is we also have to learn lessons from what has happened and not try to go back and do schooling just like we did it before COVID. So, because there were some things that we learned about how schools are set up, how the curriculum is set up, how credits, all this stuff. I think you have to not just virtual learning in and of itself is not revolutionary unless it changes the whole way we approach learning. And so a lot of the ways that we determine credits and how many hours and blah, 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 all of that stuff needs to be reexamined, right? And maybe what COVID will force people to do is to reexamine some of the structures and the way that these structures have been set up to, quote, educate people. Because frankly, some of it is about employment of people. It's about maintaining a bureaucracy that doesn't necessarily work in the interests of the children, but it works in the interests of the people who work in the bureaucracy. And so, if we're going to really examine this, it has to go much deeper than just talking about virtual learning versus not virtual learning. We have to talk about the way that the whole learning system is structured and is set up.
Okay, now I'm going to put you on the spot. Based on what you know about my work here, what do you have to say? the work I'm doing with North Korean refugees over here. I know you don't know all of the, yeah.
Until you told me about it, obviously I had no idea what you were doing. Cases going on in South Korea or whatever. I still don't know, as you know, a lot about it. But what I do know is it's something that you're committed to, and it's something that you believe is important, and you're making a contribution. And because I know you and I believe in you, I know that the work that you're doing is important. And I'm just, proud that you decided to take on this work. And it's clear it's a love thing. I mean, it's a commitment to an idea, to a purpose. And what I would do is just encourage you to continue to pursue that purpose, as long as you really feel that it's making the contribution that you intended.
Oh, yeah. Well, people ask me over here, how long are you going to stay here? I say, as long as I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing. If I'm not enjoying it, then I'm gone. I'll just go off and do something else. But believe me, a lot of lessons I learned from you are being applied over here in my work.
Well, that's good. It's always humbling to hear that something done or said has an impact on people and how they do their work. But I also want people to know that I've also learned from you. This hasn't been like I don't believe in that mentor-mentee thing and see it as like a one-way process. I see it as a two-way process, right? That if you are fortunate enough to have someone call you a mentor, the only way you can be a true mentor is to also learn from the person that you are mentoring. And so I think if that relationship doesn't go both ways, then it's not a productive relationship.
Okay, well, I will embrace that, and then also say, I still tell young people, when you identify someone that you can learn from, go ahead and adopt them as a mentor, even if they resist as you do. Go ahead and do it, so you can have a longer term relationship with them, because again, we've known each other 20 years. So thanks so much, Dr. Fuller. Thanks so much for
hard to believe it's been 20 years, right? Just like it's hard to believe that in a couple of weeks I'm gonna turn 80. I'm like, oh,
that's right.
It is like when COVID hit and they started, talking about the elderly, I had to keep reminding myself they're talking about you. These elderly people. They need. I'm one of the elderly people that they're talking about.
Right. Right. Good. Excellent. All right. So thanks so much. This has been a great first show with Dr. Howard L. Fuller. This is Workable Words with Casey Lartigue. You can please subscribe to my channel. And Dr. Fuller, I think they can find you on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, I'm around there. I do have a website, howardlfuller.org, howardfuller.org. But I invite everyone to go to the website of our school, Dr. Howard Fuller Collegiate Academy. And if you feel inclined to support us, there's a donate button right there on that website. So we would appreciate any kind of support that we can get.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay.